All right, here we go. So this is going to be a new monthly segment that I'm going to run. And what we're going to do is all month, I'm going to be paying attention to common questions I get on social medias, at the curling club, and specifically there's a document, I'll link it below in the YouTube and I'll link it below in the show notes that you can fill in if you've got a specific question. And with the document, it's a Google form and it's anonymous. Like it's there's no way I'll ever know it's you. So obviously be kind, ask nice questions, things that you actually really want to know about. And the beautiful thing is we've accumulated 6 questions that I can I'm going to answer here in the next little bit. Now, of course, this is going to be largely unedited and likely much more entertaining if you're watching it on YouTube. So apologies to those who are listening on podcast. Actually, thank you if you're listening on podcast as well. I'm going to try to do a good job of explaining what I'm doing. But the nice thing with YouTube is that now we kind of, what is my body doing? Get to watch me workshop some things. So this is my little, work from home space. Hopefully this little tiny little mic is working, and I'm really excited to see how this goes. So if you've got any questions, make sure that you start asking them early enough in the months that I have a chance to add them to my Q&A list. If I have questions that are kind of similar, I'm obviously going to kind of put them together into an area. And you'll notice what I'm doing even with this one is if I've answered something in a podcast already or a YouTube, I'm probably just going to end up linking, give you the Coles Notes version of an answer, and then link where that might be for you to go get more information. So we've got about 6 questions and then a case study. And I'm really excited about this case study because I know that this is something that doesn't exist yet. And as a movement therapist, case studies are a way that other coaches, myself included, I've been a part of many different types of case studies, and we get a chance to see a case, so how someone's moving, and assess them and work together as a group of like-minded individuals, people who've got different backgrounds, different experience levels, work through how you might help them with that. So I've done that in movement therapy groups, and I think that is going to be something really awesome to try to do in the curling world, doing some coaching case studies. And I hope I bring a unique perspective with this, is that I look at the human body and how it can move, and not just your typical move your broom here, don't do a C pattern, all those, those buzzword types of coaching that some coaches get caught up in. But the intent is that we start to expand our knowledge as coaches. So this is something that I hope I can take the case study from this into a interactive group style. So if you're loving that, make sure you let me know. And I'll, of course, maybe start a bit of a wait list or something, but this is super early. This is the first one ever. I'm not even certain how the video and the audio at the same time is going to work. Hopefully my camera does not run out of battery. Yeah, so here, let's see how this goes. I will be likely editing the audio for the podcast, cutting out big chunks. So the YouTube, though, I don't know how to do that yet. We're going to get there. We're going to figure it out. So it's going to be a little bit chunkier, but you get to hit the fast forward button if you'd like. So here we go. Question number 1. How can I learn to throw different draw weights when practice ice is slow? So practice ice is slow, but I want to practice draws. This seems to be what the question is. So I am going to do a podcast specifically answering this question in the future. I've got loads of little ideas running out there because I find it interesting. We have all of these drills, progressive hog line, pop goes the weasel, the one where the skip and I are throwing, and then the 2 sweepers are trying to get the rock to either land short of the house or sweep it through. Like there's loads of little draws that work on executing draw weight, but not much information out there on actually how to find draw weight. And that's what I hope to tackle in that podcast. So quick answer. What I see right now when people are going out to practice draw weight is that they're throwing to the right side, the left side, they're switching handles, they're doing this. They're trying to find draw that day. And as you said, thank you, person that asked this question, if the ice is slow, how do I practice draw weight? And the answer isn't necessarily about finding draw that day. I think a lot of what people are asking when they say, how do I find draw weight, is they want to know how in a game, if they throw too heavy, how do they learn how to throw lighter? And then how do they learn to throw that same weight over and over again to consistently throw draw weight once they find it? And I think when we come to practice, what we need to focus on is that same thing. So it doesn't matter how fast your ice is. If it's really fast or it's really slow, you're trying to go out and throw 4 to 8 rocks in a row, same line, same path, and try to get it to land, let's say, tight of the rings. Okay, so we try to get it land tight of the rings, and we do that 4 to 8 times. Repetition is what a lot of people are missing when they're practicing. Right, the same thing over and over again. It's boring. Then can you throw 4 to 8 that are like backhouse? And then can you throw 4 to 8 that are tight? And I just want to touch on my notes here. Yes, because it's not about finding T-line by yourself. It's about trying to find a weight that your sweepers can take to the T-line or top 8 or back 8, whatever the skip has asked for. And I think as a mindset piece, a lot of players are trying to make the shot. They're like, I have to throw T-line. But then they're heavy because the skip had called on sweeping and they had to sweep it further. Okay, we're trying to throw weights that our sweepers can take to where we want to go. So number one, you're going out to practice and you're trying to find one weight. Let's say you're going for tight, 4 to 8 rocks. Okay, then you're trying to throw 10 feet more, 4 to 8 rocks. Okay, come back to that one, 4 to 8 rocks. So it's not necessarily about I am going practicing and I need it to land on the T-line today. It's can I throw a weight and I know what that feels like, and then can I throw a little bit more and know what that feels like, and a little less and know what that feels like, and then eventually we're getting to that point. So it's a lot about repetition, and I've done episodes on effective and efficient practices, repetition, repetition, repetition. But then once we've tackled that, then we can switch up where we're drawing, and if we want light and then heavy and then light and then heavy. Okay, so practice throwing for different spots on the ice and aim for consistency. Those are my notes. Again, don't worry about finding T-line. If your practice ice is slow, and normally your competitive ice, like when you go out and play, isn't slow, maybe try to get your rock to land on the hog line. Okay, so one of the things you can start to think about is if you have like a nice, comfortable, easy draw weight, and it lands on the hog line, your new T-line is the hog line. Because you know when you get to a game, that hog line, the weight that you use to kick out to get to the hog line, when you do that same weight to kick out, it will land closer to the T-line. Okay, so it's about being consistent and being able to call on different amounts of weight, preferably in that like 6 to 10 foot area, right? Or beginner curlers, you're probably looking to try to get somewhere in the as a guard and somewhere top house. We're not actually throwing T-line, okay? Okay, question 2 is kind of a 2-parter. How to move through feeling super behind on curling skills after being out from long-term injury, and how to move through being scared of getting injured after returning from serious injury. So mentally, I've been off the ice for a long time because I was injured. Mentally, how do I manage with not being where I was or I was expecting to be at this point? And then also, how do I make sure that I don't get injured again? And I'm going to read off of this because I've got some good notes here. So in episode 47, I'll link it below, I have a great conversation with current, this weekend, so spoiler alert, Quebec Scotties champion Emily Riley, and we go through ways that you can build confidence and resilience. So finding yourself a mental performance coach that you can follow online or get a couple sessions with, that can be really, really helpful. I highly recommend you check out that episode 47. We talked a little bit about the mindset. She gives some mindset tools that will be helpful in this scenario. When you've taken a break for whatever reason and you're coming back, how do you deal with that? Okay, so I'm not going to directly address that. In the meantime, I'm going to pull from episode 19 with Lori Olson, and the title of that episode is exactly what I want you to take from this. It's about giving yourself grace. You didn't get injured on purpose. Okay, you got injured. You had to take time off, 2, 4, 6, 8 weeks, months, what have you, and now you're coming back. So you have to give yourself some grace. You had expectations to be somewhere in your skill level, and we got injured. It got interrupted. We can't do anything about that time that was lost. We're here now. So give yourself grace, be patient with yourself, and then focus on coming back. Okay? You've been off the ice for a good reason, and maybe you don't feel like you're where you should be, but take that pressure off yourself. Okay? It's about taking now and recentering and saying, this is where I am today. This is where I want to be in a couple weeks. These are the little things that I'm going to focus on. And we're going to really focus and hone in on looking for wins and feeling really good about our performance and slowly making adjustments as we move forward. Okay. And that answers the second part, is trying not to jump to where you think you should be and just really accept and be where you are today. And then be okay with that patient process of trying to get yourself back. And I know that's not easy. It's competitive season right now, right? Like lots of people are doing play downs. We're getting geared up for club stuff. Like I know it's not great and it's not ideal, but it is what it is. Those are the cards. So as for returning to sport after an injury, I'm not certain I've directly referenced this in an episode at all yet, but I did do a return to curling after the pandemic. So I gave a couple guidelines there. So I'll make sure I share that. But your best bet, especially while you're injured, okay, so let's say you're injured today, you know you're going to be off for a while, hunt yourself down a really good movement therapist. And I say movement therapist because it could be a physio, it could be a chiro, it could be a massage, maybe it's a trainer, whoever it is, someone that's going to be able to help you not only heal and manage that injury, but prepare you and your body for preventing it and returning to the sport. Okay, we want to build confidence in yourself mentally and subconsciously in the joints and the joints around where the injury is. I'm just imagining it. Maybe it was a knee injury that this person was asking, and be able to do things. This is my personal preference. Get to the point where you can do things off the ice that are similar to and mimic the demands of curling, so that your confidence is higher, knowing you can go into that slide position, you can get into that hack, you can jump, okay? Jump out of the hack, land, all those little things. So that off ice stuff is really important when we're injured. And this is where combining your rehab and your curling coaching and all those pieces in between come in handy. And of course, that's something that I do, but more people are hopefully picking up on this. And there is a difference between rehabbing an injury. Okay, like a lot of the time, like for example, I remember back when I broke my foot, this was what I've talked about this before. This is what kind of got me into movement therapy and looking into rehab and potentially being a physio and all that kind of stuff. Was I Googled while I was injured before I went to physio, I was like, rehab ankle or broken foot. And I found this document. It was made. It was awesome. It had all these little exercises. So I start doing them. And then guess what? I show up next day at the physio and they gave me the exact same sheet. So that experience aside, that was when I literally looked at my mom and I was like, I don't need to come here anymore. I found these things online. That was a bad experience. We found a better physio after that. Someone that was able to do manual stuff and help take me from there. But I regress. So you're injured, you're managing the injury. That physio, whoever you get, is responsible for making sure that that tissue or area is healed. But oftentimes those physio programs end, they're like, oh, tendon in the ankle that was sprained is healed. Great. But you can't flex the foot fully. You can't bend in the knee fully. Your glute's not working properly. Your core is not in the right spot. Your posture's off because you've been focusing on or using a crutch or something. So there's this bridge between rehab and performance that needs to be bridged. And a lot of rehab spaces will do that, but just make sure that if you've been given the go-ahead, and I have friends they've given birth, and then 6 weeks later, the doc's like, yeah, you're good to go. But they haven't done anything in between that. Their acute phase, everything's healed up, but to do the performance end, what they need to do, they're not there yet. Just because they're good to go doesn't mean they're good to go hardcore like they normally would. Okay. Where was I on that? Who can help you not only manage the injury, but prepare you physically to avoid it in the future. So next, take your time returning to curling. So you've done your acute training, you've gotten your gap between rehab and performance, and now you're like, okay, I'm ready to get back on the ice. Here we go. Start with practices where you can start with practices. That's my hope. I hope that the first time you get on the ice after an injury can be a practice, because then you get to control the number of rocks that you throw. And if things aren't feeling good, you can stop, and you don't feel like you're putting anyone out if you have to leave the ice early. Start with draws and easy sweeping. Ooh, this iPad is heavy. And slowly build yourself back up to your regular routine, preparing you for whatever position you play. Okay, so start with easy shots, simple shots. A coach can be very helpful for this, because my hope is that they're emphasizing the fundamentals, moving well, focusing on a good warm-up, looking at your routines, looking at all those little things that are easier to focus on and kind of get back. And then we'll work on getting the weight control and the power and the accuracy in those pieces. But if you've got the routines and habits and your setup's good, then we can work on the other pieces on your own without your coach. All right, I like this question. This next question. Who is the best sweeper? Someone took my Q&A literally. They were like, yep, I want to know who you think the best sweeper is. And I don't think I answer that. So my answer is a little bit more convoluted. I think the purpose of a solid sweeping pair, so it's not up to me about one awesome sweeper. Can they do an awesome job just in one spot as they go up and down the ice? I think it's about the sweeping pairs. I think that's where the magic happens. The purpose of a solid sweeping pair is to widen the shot tolerance, widen the tolerance for the thrower in order for them to make the shot. Because you've got sweepers, depending on the ice that you're on and their abilities, you've got the best ones in the world. They can hold the line and prevent it from curling. They can make it curl. They can take it further. So that makes it so much easier as the person throwing the shot that their tolerance is smaller. If your sweepers are effective and know what they're doing, the skip can put the broom down, knowing that they can use their sweepers to correct any deviance in line or weight. And the player is going to be able to know that, okay, yes, we can add weight here, or I'm going to throw a certain weight, and we know we can make it curl, all those pieces. A reflection I had the other day was no team ever puts the broom down and has absolutely no sweeping. I think that's quite interesting. Go to practice and be like, oh, no, I wasn't 100% on the broom, or my weight wasn't 100%. Well, that doesn't happen in a game either. Hey, even the best players, those elite guys at the slams and ladies at the slams, they're not 100% accurate on weight and line, but they're able to be within a tolerance that allows them to use their sweepers to make it. And they've planned for that when they put that broom down. No team ever puts the broom down expecting to not have to sweep it. That actually might be panicky for teams because they're like, what's happening? Like, it's a team shot for a reason. The skip is literally picking the line with the expectation that there will be sweeping in a way to make the shot. And maybe people aren't doing that on purpose with their brains, but that's what we really should be doing, in my opinion. I think that's kind of cool. And I think it's hard to say who the best sweeper is, especially since there are so many out there doing so many great things, from fitness to position to techniques to communication and being just a smart sweeper, which means that you know when to sweep and remembering pads and judging and all that stuff. So I couldn't tell you who the best sweeper is. I couldn't even tell you who my favorite pair was. I think that one of the things that I'm looking at is, are they effective when they are moving their brush? And are they efficient so they can do it over and over again? They're not taped up. They're not thumper gunning for 4 hours between games. Like, they're really able to focus on making good shots, but then also, do they know when to sweep? Do they know how to communicate to their teammates? All those different pieces that go into it. So it's not necessarily to me about who looks the best. It's who's able to get those rocks exactly to where they need to go. And I'm just going to grab a sip of tea. Good stuff. The little old granny. Okay, next question. I am a club curler. When I watch elite teams play, they always seem to have short meetings at the end of every end. What type of things are they discussing? I think this is a great question. And this is a neat time. So the answer is that this is a neat time in the game. Aside from timeouts, it's the actual only time where 4 players are all together and able to communicate directly with each other. Normally the front end and the back end are kind of adding in or sending messages up and down. Maybe we're having individual meetings with the skip or as front end pairs, but this is a time where all 4 team members get to come in and have a little huddle. It's not normally very long. What happens is, if you're seeing it on TV, every team is going to use about a minute. So if they're timed, there's a minute before kind of a minute buffer between when the rocks stop and when the next team should throw. And every team is going to use that minute a little bit differently and to a differing degree. Teams are different. Every team's a little bit different. But in a nutshell, they're discussing things like, what did they learn about the ice? Oops, sorry. Let's keep this going. What happened? Here we go. Let me just check my recording. We're still going. Okay. So let's come back to that. In a nutshell, they're going to talk about a couple of different things. So they might talk about a couple of different things. What did they learn about the ice in the last end? Okay. If a spot seemed straighter or a rock seemed curlier. Okay. Remind each other of their overall game goal or their strategy. Maybe they found that they wanted to play lots of rocks and play, but right off the hop, the skip keeps calling takeouts, and they're like, you know what, I really want to come back to our game and we want to throw draws or what have you. It's a chance to remind someone about something that they're working on in their delivery. So it might say, okay, just a reminder, like we need to keep our releases crisp. We need to have a nice, good follow through. A couple years ago, I had to be kept telling to sweep in front of a rock, really embarrassing, but it's a nice space for that to happen, opposed to having it yell up and down the ice. Some teams will allow little jokes or a moment of venting frustration. So it's a time for emotions to come out. And even if a player feels like they need help getting into the right headspace, it's an opportunity for them to say, hey, like, I need some help, guys. Like I'm feeling out of it. Help me get back to my routines. Help me find the wins. I mean, I'm a big believer that you're in charge of your own headspace, but you're a team, right? Your teammates can help. You can open that up. Most teams, though, are talking about what they want to get out of the next end. What is their main goal, that end? So force the other team to one, for example. What is an acceptable outcome? So we're going to try to force them to one, and it's okay if they blank. What we absolutely don't want is for them to get two. So that's going to dictate the strategy that you're going to use and the tactics that you're going to use. This way, as the skip is calling shots, the entire team is on board. Hey, if there's a peel called or if a draw is called, we know, yep, we want to go hard for the steal. We want to go hard for two. We really want to keep it open and try to go for a blank. Now the entire team has an idea of, yeah, we're calling these shots because we have this end goal. Lastly, in club, you don't have the luxury of a whole minute between ends. And I thought this was important to include because a lot of people listening are more the club curler. And sometimes the skip doesn't come down after the last shot. They throw the last shot and they turn around. They're trying to be efficient. There's lots of draws happening, right? We don't have time for a minute between each one. So your club team might have a different routine, and maybe the in-between end meeting happens with the front end players as the lead is getting into the hack. So a lot of teams kind of do it anyway. So like, oh, good end, guys. Let's go, girls. We're gonna, go for our two this end, or your first rock is gonna be this, or something like that. Okay. Two more questions. When I throw, sometimes I get distracted by focusing so much on balance. And let me start it over. When I throw, sometimes I get distracted by focusing so much on balance, etc., and miss something else in the shot. And it's ironic that I distracted myself in answering and reading that question. So I'm going to read a nice long message that I wrote. This came from the Discord, the curling Discord. So the best moment for me personally, a few years ago, I had a coach that wanted us to all find a way to make our unique personalities work on the ice. And it was amazing. I loved that coach. Very grateful for that coach. The interesting, because I've had coaches in the past that have been like, Steph, you need to focus. Steph, you need to focus. You need to focus more. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? Like, I feel like I'm focusing. I'm paying attention. I don't understand what you want from me. Okay, so when I had this other coach, they were like, your personality is different. Shock and awe, here we go. But what I've learned, that the neurotypical definition of focus doesn't work for me, which is that old coach who said focus more, wanted 100% attention all the time, never let your eyes look somewhere else, never pay attention, just sit there like a little robot and only ever. That doesn't work. That doesn't even work for most people. And I've done presentations and webinars and courses and programs, on focus. And this is the entirety of it, is that the actual definition, and it's a broad definition, in my opinion, is it's not about having 100% focus or attention on something. It's when you inevitably get distracted, you're able to bring your attention back. So yes, we want sustained attention, but not to the detriment of burnout, not to the detriment of almost being distracting because you're trying so hard, and not to the detriment where you don't know how to refocus and bring yourself back in. Okay, now I lost this. So yeah, that's basically what I'm getting at. You're saying you're getting distracted. What was the question? Sometimes I get distracted by focusing so much on balance, etc., and miss something else in the shot. So first of all, the definition of focus has to do with being able to bring your attention back. The second part of that is, now that I'm realizing this, you weren't asking about what is focus. You're like, I'm distracted by my balance. Here we go. One of the things, number one thing I would say is you need to practice. Right? Because we are consciously aware of these things that there's unconscious incompetence. So I don't know that there's things I need to improve. So unconscious incompetence. I don't know, I need to improve things, I'm just going along. Someone told me that in order to get better balance, I need to put my foot here and then I need to kick. So now I have a conscious incompetence. I'm aware of that thing that I'm not good at, and that's distracting. Okay, but then someone helped me and I practiced and I was able to say, okay, in practice, I can move the rock and the broom, put the foot under and then slide. Now I have balance. But that's distracting, right? I'm trying to hit the broom and get the weight. And now I have to think about here and putting this foot here and sliding. There's extra things roaming around there. So that is conscious competence. I can do it. Okay, I'm aware of it, but it is a little bit distracting. And I just want to double check my fit. Okay, then what we want to get to is unconscious competence, making things automatic. And that happens with practice. So if you never touch practice ice, you're always going to be distracted by all those little things that you need to do in your delivery. Okay, in practice, we get a chance to do all those things consciously, repeat, like I said in the first question. And then we get to a point where we don't have to think about it quite as much. Now we can start to think about hitting the broom and getting the weight. Okay, so long way of saying that we need to practice more if you're getting distracted by things like balance. The other side of that is, if you've ever done a coaching session with me, you end up with a nice long list of things that I'm like, yeah, you could work on these things, it'd be great. But I'm going to highlight 3 things for you to focus on. You're going to go practice and you're going to go practice those 3 things. But the very first number 1 priority is something that I'm having you focus on in a game. So you might be practicing 3 things, but in a game, you're focusing on 1. Okay? And in the practice, when you're doing those 3 things and that number 1 priority becomes unconscious now, you can do it, you don't have to think about it. Now you're left with 2 things that you're focusing on and the next thing that you're taking into your game. So that's my strategy when I have people who I'm working with in a coaching scenario, is that I might give you a massive list, but we're prioritizing not only in focus of our session, excuse me, the dog is scratching himself. Okay, but we're also going to give you something to focus on during your practices, keep it really simple. And then I'm going to give you something to focus on in a game. Okay, so you might just be giving yourself too many things to think about, but instead of prioritizing the one piece that's going to get you the most bang for your buck and then practicing the rest in practice. All right, last question. Hello, years ago, I attended a talk from an older gentleman who ran marathons. One of the things he said was some marathoners like to drink Coke halfway through a marathon. He said they do this for 2 reasons. The first is Coke has sugar, which helps replace spent energy. And the second is Coke contains caffeine. And caffeine is a stimulant, which allows a runner to run faster than the perceived effort the athlete is exerting. Recently, it occurred to me that perceived effort of exertion is what controls draw weight. Perceived effort of exertion is what controls draw weight. So in theory, an athlete with a relatively high amount of caffeine in their system, example, early morning game, trying to wake up, could be at a disadvantage compared to an athlete with no caffeine in their system. Okay, and they say specifically a disadvantage. The caffeinated athlete will be required to increase their perceived effort of exertion as the caffeine leaves their system. So as the caffeine's leaving their system, this person's going to have to try harder, that's what they're saying, in order to maintain the same draw weight as the game progresses. If the athlete is unaware of this, they may start to believe the ice changing or challenge stopwatch readings from teammates. I've never heard this to be a problem at the club level, but is this a known issue among high performance curlers, or is the stimulant effect of caffeine not strong enough to affect draw weight? Also, are there other substances such as painkillers that have similar effects? Example, if an athlete were to be trying to pull through an injury with the use of painkillers. Okay, I think what you're asking is, can stimulants or depressants influence your ability to judge the weight you are kicking out of the hack with? On instinct, I want to say yes, a little bit, but I think it also depends, okay? And it depends because as a high caffeine taker, drinker, eater, whatever, it depends because most coffee drinkers I know always have coffee in the morning. They never miss it. So not suddenly having coffee and then being like jittery little crazy. Like they know they have the same thing every day. It's probably the most ingrained habit that they have, okay? Like it's like wake up, brush my teeth, go to the bathroom, have coffee, okay? And most of us are crazy enough. If we have coffee in the morning, we're probably also having a coffee later in the day if we're playing a later game. So here's where I think it gets interesting. You asked about as the effect of caffeine is wearing off, okay? The half-life of caffeine, so essentially you take caffeine and it's not like caffeine is there and then caffeine's gone, is that every, so many hours it cuts in half by how much you have, and eventually it's out of your system. Okay, so I did a couple of Google searches, found a reputable website, WebMD. Okay, so even if this number's off by a little bit, it's probably an average. About 6 hours after you consume caffeine, half of it is still in your body. So if you have coffee at 6 a.m., you still have half of it in your body at noon. It's not really gone until the afternoon. And if you have a second cup of coffee in the middle of the day, by 6 o'clock, you have half of it. And by bedtime. So I don't think, my guess is that slow diminishing of caffeine, won't influence perceived effort of exertion, because in a game's only 2 hours. Okay, and then there's also the overall fatigue effect that's happening just as the game's going on, multiple games that are happening. If this is something that you were like, oh, I've noticed this, I'd be asking you what you put in your coffee, because I know that if you put milk and sugar in, that sugar is going to be absorbed and used and depleted, because we're exercising, faster. So it might be the sugar if you're putting milk and sugar in. Those are my initial thoughts. I don't think that's something that we're worried about. If you're someone though that normally has coffee in the morning, and you usually curl at night in night leagues, but then went to a weekend spiel and had a coffee in the morning and then went curling, maybe you notice a slight difference because you're not used to being highly caffeinated for a curling game. But I don't think in a game it's wearing off enough in the way that you think it is to have that effect. Yeah, I think you can blame caffeine if you're feeling jittery and you're not used to it. I think that's something that I feel like would be more of a distraction, because you just feel a little bit different. You kind of vibrate if you have too much. Or let's say you have that coffee in the morning, you're not used to having curling in the morning. Next time, just learn and have coffee, have a half a cup, and then the rest after your game or whatever. At the elite level, those athletes are trying to keep their routines as consistent as possible before a morning game, before a night game, so that they're not as affected by food and caffeine and all that kind of stuff. So those are things that the elite are paying attention to, is trying to find that ideal performance state with their nutrition, with their hydration, with their sleep, with their mindset. And I think that they're going to be paying attention to coffee. I know I can't have loads of coffee before a game. That just, look at me, like it would be too good, too much. When it comes to things like anti-inflammatories and pain relievers, I wouldn't suggest taking anything that makes you feel drowsy before you curl, especially if you're driving there. Okay, so it really, an anti-inflammatory or painkiller is probably not going to affect the perceived effort unless it was drowsy, whatever drug that makes you drowsy, I can't remember. So you shouldn't really notice a difference in that weight control. Now, depending on your level of play, you might want to double check whatever supplement you're taking, that stimulant, that cold medication, and making sure that it is WADA compliant, that's World Anti-Doping Agency, so that if you're taking cough medicine, making sure you're double checking that that's not going to come up, because it's got ephedrine in it, and that's a stimulant. And as a general rule, I don't recommend athletes take things like NSAIDs or pain relievers in order for them to play. Like, as a general rule, I don't really like that. I'm definitely not going to tell someone not to do it, but I'm also going to not going to recommend it, because I think that it sets you up for the potential of more or longer term injury, because you can't feel that pain. Like, pain is a signal that your body is sending you, saying like something's not right, we need to rest, we shouldn't move like this. So I don't like the idea of dulling that. Now, I've definitely done it. Okay, you're in a big event, you need to play, and you'll deal with that injury after. That's fine. But I do kind of want to point that out. Not a big recommendation. If you've got to pop ibuprofen before you curl, I don't know what that's doing to your body. You're not, let alone your liver, but yeah, let alone your knee or whatever. So, okay, now we're on to the case study. Now pop a little bit more tea first. Here we go. How are we at? Okay, let's see if we can do this in like 15 minutes. We'll see what we can do. So here's my case study. Someone actually sent in a submission, which is excellent. Thank you. If you've got a general struggle, or you're a coach and you've got an athlete, like, obviously don't name the person. Try not to be like, they have this color of hair. Like, I don't need to know that stuff. Okay, but if you describe it in a pretty general way, we can start to dive into that. And then of course, anyone is like, I would be totally fine with sending you videos and you walking through how you would coach me. That would be great. And I will, share my screen and walk through how we would do that and do a little bit of analysis, but someone's gonna be brave enough to do that. You essentially get a free coaching session, but I know that's a little bit scary. So if anyone's brave enough for that, hook me or send me a message. I'm really hoping we get to that in the future. So middle-aged, new curler, my slide foot naturally points in a bit and I'm unable to point it out during the delivery. And I'm also getting some pain in that knee after curling. I feel like I point my foot out. I feel like if I point my foot out, it might improve my stability and reduce my knee pain. Any tips for improving mobility and stability for the delivery? Thank you. Okay. So how I kind of organize it is I like to identify the struggle. And I know that's different than the goal. Okay, the struggle and the goal, the same thing, but worded differently. So the struggle is this player, their foot turns in and they feel like it affects balance and also causes pain in the knee. Their goal is better balance and less pain in the knee. Okay, so I might not necessarily move that foot if that's not the root of their problem. Okay, I like to know what they think, and we're going to talk about that in a second. So it's kind of interesting. In the 90s, I say in the 90s, it was like the 2000s, but whatever. In the 90s, they taught us, let me see if I can back up enough here. Actually, let's get this up here. Okay, in the 90s, they taught us to, when we're curling, to turn our toe out or bring the heel under. Okay, and if I kind of angle myself at the camera here, okay, when I turn my toe out, that causes a bit of a torque at the knee. Okay, so if you imagine I'm in a lunge position with my leg up on the bench, okay, and my thigh bone points forward and I just turn the toe out and the heel in. Okay, that's going to cause a torque at my knee because my upper thigh is actually pulling inwards and rotating inwards, but my shin bone is rotating out and turning out and the ankle's turning out. So I don't like that. I don't like that cue. That cue didn't work for me. I ended up opening my leg to the side. Personally, I had lots of fascial pain on the inside of my knee. And that's because my ankle rotated and my shin bone rotated and my femur bone rotated in different angles. Okay. And what I think they meant is that they wanted it to come from the hip. And we're going to talk about that in a second. So again, I obviously am showing you in the YouTube. So if you want to hop into the YouTube, not certain how many minutes we're into here, but hop on the YouTube and see, you can see in live. So in the 90s in Canada, they said, I want you to curl and I want you to turn your toe out. So you watch me curl, you see my foot turn out. That's just so automatic for me. My knee doesn't hurt. I don't miss the broom, so I'm not going to change it. I've tried to turn the toe forward because you watch all the Europeans, knee and toe, like foot, are aiming forward. So they're not turning their toe out. They're not turning the toe out, and it's probably saving their knees in a long term. Okay. So the idea, and I have a shoe here somewhere. Let me find a shoe to show you. Meant to pull this out, so sorry. Okay, so it's going to be easier to see on the camera, but if you're forward and you're over top of that foot forward, the idea when you turn the foot out was that it created this extra base of support. So you kind of you would put your center of mass over like the midfoot, and it would be within this kind of bigger rectangle of stability. Whereas if it's forward, now we're kind of balancing on this versus this. Okay, and that's hard for me to show unless you hop on the YouTube. I'm so sorry. But yeah, the idea was that it widened the base of support to turn the toe out. Where this can get problematic at the knee, of course, is if that foot turns out. Really at the knee, a lot of what happens is that foot is doing one thing, shin bone is doing another, and thigh bone. The knee doesn't do anything. It's the bone's relative. So if your shin bone rotates in and your thigh bone rotates in, we're gonna have some hip pain. If your shin bone rotates out and your thigh bone rotates in, we're gonna have some knee pain. So there has to be this like oppositional movement. Don't dive into that too deep. You don't have to think about that. Okay, let's see here. I'm going to share a link where I dive into the necessary hip mobility during the slide, because differing levels of hip flexion. So this is 90 degrees of hip flexion. Okay, a little bit less. So here's that angle of hip flexion, 90 degree, sorry, bigger, not very big flexion here, 90 degrees, and then a lot of people are deep, deep, deep hip flexion. Okay, they require different movements in the thigh and in the pelvis. So the femur bone and the pelvis, and of course, lower down into the shin and the ankle and the knee. Okay, so differing levels of hip flexion are going to determine what you're going to do with your hip. So for my nice friend here that sent in the case study, what I'd suggest is not necessarily focusing on turning the toe out, but externally rotating and abducting the thigh, which will bring the foot with it. So I'm not going to think about, okay, so if this abducting is moving the leg away, externally rotating, so externally rotating and moving the leg away is going to allow us to get into that more stable, likely more stable position. Okay, if the thigh goes out, so does the toe. Okay, the foot should follow that. And I'd much rather you have the hip mobility and stability and let the foot go where it wants without forcing it. Like, I don't want you just to turn your foot out just because you could turn the toe and not find more balance or continue to feel that pain in the knee. Just turning the toe might not be the solution that you're looking for. So if you were a client, okay, if you were a client, you're like, my balance is off, my knee hurts, I think I need to turn my toe out. This is what I might do. This is how I might lay it out for you. I'd first have you throw a few rocks. Okay, I'm going to take video from multiple different angles. I want to see how you're moving. And then we would sit down and assess them together, because I think it's kind of cool when sometimes a lot of players just haven't seen themselves throw before. They have no idea what they look like. And they might go, oh, yeah, oh, I need to do that. You don't even need me because you see yourself in a video and you're kind of comparing to what you're seeing on TV and what other people are telling you that you need to do. So from there, of course, I'm making that list of things that we might improve, because the goal for the session is actually to find more balance and less knee pain. So I'm making a list of all the things that might be contributing, things that we might need to work on. But then we're going to narrow that down, because when we try to fix, let's say we fix your setup, it might solve some of the other problems. We never even have to look at them. Okay. So I'm going to guess, because I don't have you, I don't have a video of you. Wouldn't it be nice? I don't have a video of you throwing to really give you a definitive. So I'm going to guess that we need to get the hips into the right spot. Okay, so I'm going to guess that there's something happening with the femur bone, the shin bone, the foot, and the hip, and that's causing a torque at the knee. We need to be able to find a comfortable slide position on the backwards. So that's the first place that we go. It's getting into the backwards. So pretending this is the backwards. And I'm going to angle my camera down a little bit more. Okay, see if that helps. Okay, holding on to the backboards into your slide position and just having you experiment with moving the body. Maybe I can put you into a slightly different position. Okay, maybe I can rotate and move that shin yourself. We can start to balance. Okay, if you do that on the backboards, and you're like, oh, that feels good. And you get in the half and you slide and you can do it, then we're done. Okay, but what often happens is we actually don't know what it feels like to kind of square the hips up and get ourselves in a good spot. So this is the exercise I start a lot of people with. And I recognize that I'm starting, I'm going to show you with my right leg forward. And then when I turn around, I'll do my left. Okay, so hips level in a half kneeling position, taking that pelvis and actually physically turning it to the left pushes the knee forward. And physically turning the pelvis to the right pulls the right knee back, the right hip back, and the left hip forward. So at the pelvis, we're relatively moving externally. We're externally rotating the pelvis and internally. Okay, externally rotating and internally rotating. So we're getting this hip movement. Okay, and you'll notice that the leg, the femur bone, kind of goes out and opens. There's that abduction and externally rotates. Okay, and then as it comes back, it's internally rotating and pulling into midline. It's adducting as we go back. So internally rotating and adducting, externally rotating and abducting. Okay, so this is femur bone relative to the pelvis. We're getting movement. Okay, and this is important. So if I turn around, okay, and I want to take my sacrum in the middle of my pelvis and aim it at the target, I don't want my thigh bone forward, my pelvis rotated to the right. See, that pulls that leg in. Okay, we want this pelvis square. So we're going to If we could kind of shift side to side. Okay, we've got the hip is being pushed to the left, so we're externally rotating the pelvis, the femur, okay? And then at the shin bone, that's internally rotating if you're really diving into that. And then bringing that hip back is internally rotating and adducting, pulling into midline, okay? So if we shift like this, what we're looking for on the slide for balance is the two hip bones square to the target or your sacrum square to the target. That means we need to pull this left hip back, right hip forward, and keep that back as we go into our slide. And depending on how much hip flexion you have, okay, so how much hip flexion you have, if you don't have a lot of hip flexion, you're going to have more of a upright slide, and you're going to need a lot more internal rotation, and that foot is probably going to stay forward. This is likely more, where's my camera? This is likely more what you're going to be when you're a little bit higher up. It's very hard to have the thigh open, okay? So a little bit higher up, holding yourself up a little higher. If you are much more flexible, the lower you get into hip flexion, so a higher amount of hip flexion, so that angle decreases more and more, okay? We need that internal rotation and adduction to get the hip back, but then as we move forward and lower into more hip flexion, we need external rotation and abduction away from midline. That allows that knee and that shin and that foot, knee, femur bone and foot to kind of be at the same angle. We don't want femur bone and foot to be at the opposite angle. That's a lot of torque. Okay, same thing here. We don't want femur bone out, foot in. Okay, I'm just running out of battery. We're gonna do it. We're gonna make it. Okay, and I know that's kind of tough. I'm wearing black on black on black. Okay, but what we're trying to do is I would sit you on the backboards, get you into the position, give you this exercise to feel, focus on getting that hip back as you slide forward, and then coupling the same femur angle, femur angle to your foot angle. Okay, so if that thigh goes out a bit, the foot needs to turn out a little bit. Okay, that's how we get ourselves down. So if you get in this position, you're like, I couldn't possibly get there, then turning that toe out's not for you. If you really want to work on it, this kind of exercise is going to be helpful. Okay, that rock and reach. Let me see what else we've got. If you struggled with this, then I might take you off the ice and actually test your squat. Okay, you might be limited. Your squat, yeah, you're limited. So you might not be able to get very low because you're limited in internal rotation. Or you get in and then you kind of do a big like butt wink, okay, as you're going through. So it might be limited in a couple different things. We could also test your standing rotation. If you struggled on that side, you might find it really easy to go right and then kind of get stuck going left because you don't have the mobility at that hip. We could test your passive hip internal and external rotation. Normally I do this on your back. I just don't want to lie on the ground right now. But yeah, these are things that need to be addressed off the ice. Okay, so we're kind of coming at this from an on ice angle position, a getting in the position. I need to see how your body's moving, unfortunately. So anyone out there wanting me to give videos, that'd be lovely. But yeah, these are things that need to be addressed off the ice. Okay, we can kind of force you into a position, and yes, repetition will get you to a place you have different ranges of motion, and that's fine, but it's so much faster off the ice. So much faster off the ice. Let me see here. Yeah, these are things that need to be addressed off the ice to help you accomplish your on-ice technique adjustments. The rock and reach is a go-to for me. For anybody looking for that stability, I'm going to link an exercise called the sideline knee slide. Gives you a little bit more mobility. And for stability, I'm going to give you something that gives you that external rotation. It's going to be a side plank clam and adduction, that leg pulling in. I'm going to give you a Copenhagen side plank. So this way we can actually feel the stability and the range of motion off the ice. You get on the ice and you're like, oh, I can do that. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. That feels good. I know how to move my body in that way. It gives you that opportunity to make adjustments as you go. So this is wonderful. I really hope that this worked. Hope that this worked on YouTube and of course on the podcast as well. If the audio is okay with it kind of attached to my body here, but it's going to be what it is. Yeah, I'm really excited for this little sequence. I'm going to do this once a month. Again, taking just random questions, put them in that Q&A. I'd love to get this case study going more. So if you're a coach and you're like, I've seen, a scenario over and over and over again, I'm interested in hearing how you might manage it. Let me know. Hey, so common issues are, people have that C pattern, or they're struggling to get their shoulders in the right spot, or they're not balancing. They can't get the broom to kind of wedge into their body. Obviously, please don't send me videos of youth. If you're an adult and you're willing to put yourself up as a case study and send me some videos, I'm happy to help. Promise that I'll be super nice. I always am. But yeah, supportive would be the number one piece. And I would hope it's a conversation of sorts, obviously me to a camera, but giving some ideas and thoughts there. So hopefully that little case study gave you some ideas. That question and answer was really interesting, and I'll link those below. I can't really think of anything I need to shout out. I do have lots of ideas coming for the off season. So if you're interested in being reminded of off season stuff, and it looks in a whole bunch of different ways. We've got programs that are done for you, webinars coming up, programs like follow along programs that you can email every day. And then of course there's the VIP. And if you're like, you know what, I really want a coaching session, but I don't want it to be part of the case study, that's a virtual coaching session. I'll of course link that down below or in the show notes. So thank you so much for showing up, listening, and I hope this was entertaining for you. I'll turn off.